Hello, my quilting friends! Leah Day here with a new collaboration video. I just received a new quilt block from Margaret Leuwen, and her website is missmarkersquilts.com. So Margaret has sent me a block. Let's go check it out and figure out a cool quilting plan so that way it'll be easy to quilt together. So here's Margaret's block, and I've been thinking about the quilting design. I have already stitched this in the ditch, and I stitched it kind of carefully. So I went around basically surrounding the pink. So I made sure that everything pink was stitched in the ditch. So I skipped the ditches like here between the white triangle and the background because I might fill this in with one design that flows throughout that area, but I know I'm going to do something special in these pink places. Now, I thought about this block a lot, and I had a lot of different ideas. I was thinking about maybe doing some feathers, and the thing I kept coming back to was heart shapes. Margaret just strikes me as such a loving, wonderful person, and I really wanted to figure out a way of doing some hearts and to do two color work. So to maybe do some contrasting white over the pink diamonds and then some contrasting pink over the white diamonds. So I just took this piece of freezer paper, I laid it on top of the block, and I drew that diamond shape, and then I just drew half of the heart shape, and I like that. It looks really good. It's going to fit that space nicely. Now I'm just folding it over, and I'm going to cut that out really carefully. I want it to be nice and clean. So I intentionally sized this heart pretty small. It's not going to take up a whole lot of space within that diamond. And the reason is I want to be able to show off with some free motion quilting around it. So maybe some echo quilting in that contrasting color. So we have a couple different choices here. We can set it up like this so that we'll have basically a heart and a heart like that. We can also set up the hearts so that they're at this angle too. So it's kind of a choice of design, what you're looking at. And I don't think it matters either way. I kind of like it like that. So now I'm going to grab two different marking pencils. For the lightest fabrics, I'm going to use Fine Line Water Soluble Blue Pen. This is my favorite marker for light fabrics. It will require the block to be submerged in water in order to remove the marks after it's been quilted. But I find that this always comes out and it produces a really nice, easy to follow, thin blue line. I really like that. Okay, so that's going to mark half the heart shape, and then the other half is going to be marked with a ceramic marking pencil. So just go right around. And you can find both of these marking pencils on my website at leahday.com. So here we go. All the way around, and that. Well, it's standing out okay, but it's not great. I'm thinking maybe I'll just go ahead and use the fine line for the entire thing because I think that pink is light enough that I could probably get away. Yep, that blue is showing up really nicely, so I can get away with that. That looks good. Kind of have to play with your marking pencils. I was looking at that pink thinking it was medium, it was dark enough for my ceramic marking pencil to show up, but it really wasn't. So sometimes fabrics will trick you that way. Gotta kind of play around with it. There we go. So my plan here is I'm going to quilt half of this with one color thread. So I'm going to contrast with pink thread over here and contrast with white thread over here. So I'm going to mark the block up and figure out what I'm going to do in the background too, and I'll meet you back here when I'm ready to start quilting. So here I'm quilting along that marked heart shape, and I'm just trying to stay roughly on that marked line, but the nice thing about marks is that as long as they come out, no one will know if you accidentally stitch off the line. So if you're ever marking a quilt shape or something like that and you stitch off, then that's your own unique creation and no one will know that you made a mistake, So keep that in mind. I stitched the heart shape, and then now I'm swinging around for an echo. And now I'm going to travel stitch up in that ditch and just start echoing around that heart shape. And just a few tips for echo quilting like this. Honestly, it's just kind of a space estimation thing, and it comes with time. So when you first start echo quilting, it's probably going to be, lines get closer, lines get further apart. My lines aren't perfect. And you have to keep in mind that free motion quilting is, and especially freehand free motion quilting, that means that you're not using marks for these echoes at least. You know, that's going to have your own unique bent to it. It's going to look personal and created by you, a human being, and not like digitized and computerized and absolutely, you know, adjusted until it's 100% perfect. So just keep that in mind, and don't worry if your echoes don't come out just exactly right. So here I'm swinging up one last time. Can I kind of sneak right along that edge? Notice I slow down whenever it gets a little tricky. That's really important, you know, just slow down a little bit, and that will give you a little bit more control over your stitching. So now I'm coming around and travel stitching in that ditch. I'm just going to bounce back and forth until the space is entirely filled. And I really like this effect. It's also really quick to stitch. You know, echoes are pretty speedy. The only time-consuming part is just that travel stitching, and it's so short that it really is not a big deal just to knock out these spaces. And what I like is the quilt pattern itself lends really well for just travel stitching to the next space. So like right here, I need to get down here, so I'm just going to travel stitch right in that ditch, right on top of my previous line of stitching. Really nice and quick, get down to that next spot, and then I can knock out this beautiful heart shape right here. So I'm only quilting half of the heart shape, and I'm stitching with white isocord thread. This is the polyester thread that I really prefer for machine quilting. And I'm going to fill in half with white thread, contrasting with that beautiful pink fabric. And then I'm going to change thread to a bright pink, and I'm going to stitch the white sections just the exact same way and have contrast on the other side too. And I think that's really going to make the block look beautiful. It's going to play off of the fabric colors. You know, we're kind of taking those fabric colors and stitching them with the quilting thread, and then also accenting that contrast between the two colors. I really think two-color quilts are fun, and I honestly, I'm wanting to do more of them because they're so simple yet so wonderfully elegant. And I think playing off that with your thread color choice can really make the block, you know, it just really makes it come together nicely. So now I'm going to finish this up, just stitching back and forth. And the cool thing is, once you stitch one half of the design, I'm going to do the exact same design with pink thread. So these lines of quilting that I'm establishing with white thread, they're going to be kind of my guide or my base whenever I'm echoing around the opposite side with pink thread. So I think that's cool too. So there we go. That whole section is done and filled up with white thread. And here's what it looked like when the block was half filled. So I've switched thread colors, and I am using a dark pink, and it's a little darker than the fabric color, but I think this looks really good. It's going to stand out really boldly on the quilt surface. And in order to get away with that, I've got to be pretty particular about my stitching. So notice that I've slowed down, and I'm working really carefully as I swing around this heart shape. So I stitched that heart, and now I'm going in for my echo. And here's an extra thing that I'm trying to do, and that is to match up with the stitch lines on the opposite side, so that this bit of white is coming in and that pink thread are coming in and meeting up at the exact same places. Now, that's not always going to be possible to line everything up just exactly right, but I'm finding that matching up more lines than less is making a really cool effect. Like, every single line doesn't have to be matched up, but as long as a good number of them are matched up, I'm still getting a really neat effect on the quilt. So here I'm swinging around, and I've already matched up everything I can do down with the opposite side of that heart, and so now I'm trying to match up with these lines over here. So sometimes I'll rotate the quilt all the way around so I can see better, and I'll be aiming for that little line right there. So stitch slowly and carefully, and if I really can't eyeball it, then I'll just grab a marking pencil and mark it. I mean, you know, there's already a little bit of blue water-soluble marks on this quilt. It won't hurt it to put a few more registration lines or whatever I need. I call that assisted marking, not marking the whole design, just marking the little bits that I need. And that's absolutely allowed too. So this echo quilting is just slow and steady work, nice smooth shape. So I'm trying to move my hands with a real smooth, steady movement, running the machine slowly and carefully. And here's a situation where I'm just not going to line up with what was previous, but I can stitch up and hit the next line, and that'll work just fine. So sometimes I'll just end up skipping one line over. There's just nothing there to match up with. But I'll travel stitch up to a line on the other side and match up with that instead. And I think this is turning out so cool. It's one thing to have kind of an idea in your head and think it's going to turn out okay. Like I didn't really know if it was going to work or not. And then to have it stitch out and then turn out, I don't know, just 10 times better than what I was expecting. I just really like this 2-color effect. I think that really balances well with the 2-color block. I was a little worried about my thread color choice at first, but I'm looking at it now and I think it was just exactly right. There is a good bit of double ditching. That means that I stitched in the ditch with white thread and then now I'm kind of stitching back over it with the pink thread when I'm travel stitching. Not my favorite thing in the world to do. It's ending up making a lot of extra thread in the seam allowances. In those ditches, but sometimes you just can't get around it, and then that happens. And I don't think it is going to make the block look bad on either the front or the back. And that is one thing. It kind of helps to use a slightly busier back, and so this is some busy fabric. That's going to hide 90% of that. If the thread ends up looking just a little on the chunky side in those ditches, the backing is going to mostly hide that. So that's my plan for the inside of the block. I got to think about what I'm going to do in this border area and how I'm going to fill that in. I'll meet you back here when I figure that out, show you what I do next. So here's what I decided to do in the border. I filled in those corner spaces with another heart shape, and I filled in one side with pink and one side with white. But here's the thing, I added extra pink out here, kind of finishing that heart. I noticed it didn't exactly end up 100% symmetrical, but that's okay because now I'm going to stitch all the way around it and start adding a really cool texture to the rest of this white background. So I'm coming up around and it's just like echoing. And this is how it's going to start. We're going to echo around the heart shape and it's going to turn it into a smooth echo. So anywhere that I had kind of sharp angles or sharp turns, I'm going to go on ahead and smooth that out into a curve. So then at this point or so, I'm going to start taking a look at my block and decide how I want this to flow. And I want a nice flowing line. So this is what I call setting a foundation. Basically what I'm doing is I'm planning a line that will curve through this whole space and up then around that next heart shape. So I'll be able to flow around and around the block in a completely continuous line. But here's the other cool thing. I can sneak in here and fill in all of the rest of the stitching, and that way I won't be leaving gaps in my design either. So I'm actually going to come underneath and kind of swirl in, just following that idea of a line I marked. Remember, you don't have to stitch right on it. I want to stitch right up against one of those ditches, so then now I can travel stitch back and forth and fill in this whole weird gappy space. And all I'm doing to fill it in is just simply echoing. I am going to come to a point at that spot right there because I think that looks best. Now I'll come up, come to a point again, swirl out of that space, and I've got space for one more echo basically, just like that. So now I'll travel stitch along that ditch, come out, and then I can continue adding echoes through this area. So really you can say the entire quilting design for this block is being created with echo quilting. And I hope that you can see that my stitching is not completely 100% perfectly spaced. Sometimes those lines come closer together and sometimes they're a little further apart. And I think that looks good. I think that adds to the block. I think it adds to the design. And it's certainly more of an organic feel to it. As you come into this narrow space, just watch your speed. Notice how I slow down while I'm stitching in the ditch, and that speed up a little bit as I'm stitching out. I don't have a stitch regulator on my machine. This is just my regular home sewing machine. So that is just my foot on the foot pedal that is making those stitches. So now I can swing all the way out And I can come out here to this heart shape and begin my echo around that one. So now I'm swinging out and around, come down, and I'm just, instead of stitching like a nice point there, I'm going to turn it into a curve. So here I'm just going to turn that curve and change direction. I want everything to go nice and curvy as I work my way around the block from here on out. And you can see I've already filled in this section, so I've already established my foundational line. I've already filled in all those gaps through that space. And so now all I have to do is just work my way around it, echo quilting. You can see that funky texture, especially this nice big curve. I love that. I think that's going to look really good. And the more times it's echo quilted, the more interesting and fluid that movement's going to look. So from here, I'm just going to work my way around the block, continuing to add more and more echoes all the way around it. This is the last side that I need to just kind of plan my foundation out and fill that in. You've seen me do that already. And then from there, all I'll have to do is just continue surrounding the heart shapes, filling in this entire outer border with more echoes. And here's what it looks like whenever I finished Margaret's block. So that's it for this video. I really hope that you enjoyed learning how to quilt this beautiful quilting design. I love how this came out. It was super, super simple, but all of those repeating lines really added to the block and made it very interesting. Now, I do believe Margaret is going to be doing a quilt along, and this is going to be the very first block in the center of Margaret's medallion quilt. So I really hope that you'll go and check out her website and see this quilt along. She's going to be guiding you through it, I think, once a month through the entire year of 2018. So go and check it out at missmarkersquilts.com. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel on YouTube so you don't miss the next video coming out soon. Until next time, let's go quilt!